L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We know that after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled since he took office. It's gotten so crazy that the cost of a house in Ontario means that one couple sold their 2,000 square foot home in that province and was able to buy a 6,000 square foot castle on 37 acres of land in France. They now say they could never sell the castle and afford to move back to Canada. Why does it cost more to be a member of the middle class in Canada than to be an aristocrat in France?
Yeah. L'honorable ministre.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives, and Canadians will take no lessons from the Conservative, Mr. Speaker. There is one thing, Mr. Speaker, not many I agree, but there's one thing that the Leader of the Opposition can do for Canadians watching at home, Mr. Speaker, is to vote for the affordability bill, Mr. Speaker, that will empower more competition in this country, that will reduce GST in new housing, Mr. Speaker. Well, once for all, will they vote for Canadian? Yes or no?
Mark. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
None of the bills are affordable after 8 years of this government. I asked, why is it that you can buy a castle in France for a lower cost than a middle-class home in Ontario? And his response was basically, let them eat cake, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, people can't even afford bread after 8 years of inflationary policies. Will they reverse their inflationary deficits and reverse their tax hikes so Canadians can eat, heat, and house themselves?
L'honorable ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the Leader of the Opposition refuses to explain to Canadians why he won't support legislation that is going to make housing more affordable, that's going to build more rental units for Canadians, that's going to make groceries more affordable. Mr. Speaker, it has been clear that for the past 8 years that they've been in opposition, they haven't done anything to support Canadians. What we do know is that they've constantly voted against measures that support Canadians, like childcare, like the Canada Child Benefit, and like this legislation that they have an opportunity to do the right thing and to vote for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
They've been promising for 8 years that their bills would lower the cost, but since that time, housing costs have doubled. They promised their carbon tax would make people better off. Then they brought in a second carbon tax. And we asked the government's own officials at committee yesterday if their analysis showed that the cost would rise for energy and that these costs would be borne disproportionately by the poor and middle class, and that government official confirmed that yes. Why is this government taxing the people who can least afford it? Will they admit that after 8 years they're simply not worth the cost?
L'honorable ministre.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to a study that came out 2 days ago, in Canada, 60% of small and medium-sized business across the country have been affected by extreme weather event this year alone. 44% of them say that it has a direct hit on their revenue. What's the response from the Conservative Party? Let's make pollution free again. Let's have more climate change. Let's have more air pollution and water pollution. I think Canadians can take any of the proposition that the Conservative Party of Canada has for them, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo. L'honorable député de Calgary Forest Lawn.
After 8 long years of this Liberal NDP government doubling the national debt, doubling mortgage and rental costs, Canadians could also see a 40% increase in their monthly mortgage costs. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. 85% of variable rate mortgage holders believe they are worse off. Liberal inflation, fueled by Liberal deficits, made the most rapid interest rate hikes ever. And now Canada's most at risk in the G7 for a mortgage default crisis. When will the Prime Minister rein in his inflationary spending in so interest rates can come down and Canadians can keep a roof over their heads?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As you know, Mr. Speaker, Canada has the lowest deficit among all G7 countries. Canada has been reaffirmed as AAA credit rating because our fiscal frame is responsible. But, Mr. Speaker, we continue to support Canadians, and the Conservatives continue to call for cuts. You see, Canadian families are relying on the supports that we provide, are relying on the Canada Child Benefit, are relying on their pensions, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives' plan is to cut all of those supports to Canadians who need them.
That's right. Then I have Député de Calgary Forest Lawn.
Responsible. This finance minister can't even drive responsibly, and they want us to believe that she's fiscally responsible. Many Canadians uncomfortably close to broke, according to an MNP survey, with more than 50% of Canadians $200 away from insolvency. After 8 years of failed Liberal policies, they're just not worth the cost. There's young Canadians and fixed senior incomes living in their cars and under bridges in tents. That's the state of Canada after 8 years of their failed policies. Will this Prime Minister balance the budget, get inflation and interest rates down so more Canadians don't have to live out on the streets?
Then I have Député.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, I've been a member of Parliament since 2015. From day one, that side has pursued an austerity agenda. Canada Child Benefit, they want to cut it. Supports for seniors, they've never been there. Supports for businesses during the pandemic and since, they've never been there. We brought down taxes for small businesses not once but twice. They opposed it every single time, Mr. Speaker. We're helping cities with public transit, with other infrastructure. They are not there. They're not worth the risk, Mr. Speaker.
Then I have Député de Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, a survey released this morning by financial firm Edward Jones Canada said Canadians are stuck in a chaotic whirlwind of personal financial stress. The poll clearly shows that Canadians are preoccupied with just getting through the day, and that the idea of paying debt feels like a distant dream. Wow. It found 88% of Canadians saying their personal financial situation is affecting their well-being. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. When will the Prime Minister stop his inflationary spending so people can take back control of their lives?
Good question. Then I have Secrétaire Parlementaire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I invite the member opposite to listen to some of the testimony from experts at this morning's Finance Committee who refute those statements. But, Mr. Speaker, I would like to get back to the legislation that is before this chamber, because the Conservatives have an opportunity to help stabilize grocery prices across this country. That is legislation that they can vote on, Mr. Speaker, right now in order to support Canadians. It also includes a measure to help stimulate the construction of more homes across this country, Mr. Speaker. Another way the Conservatives can actually help Canadians.
Then I have Député de Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's been 8 years, and what the Liberal member opposite is saying does not match the facts. The Liberal deficit spending has increased inflation, which has increased interest rates. Right. A resident from my community said food prices have risen so quickly that she's been left to praying that her garden will be enough to supplement their household of 4 teenagers. You know, I used to hear from residents saying that they were hoping that they could save for a home one day, and now I'm hearing from residents saying that they're praying for a bountiful harvest to feed their family. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. When will the NDP Liberal government end their inflationary spending so people can feed their families?
The Honourable Minister.
I'd like to thank our colleague for the question. I mean, we all feel for what she said, Mr. Speaker, but instead of having words, why don't we talk about action, Mr. Speaker? There is one thing that the opposition can do, Mr. Speaker. Not many, I agree, but there's one thing. They can vote for the affordability bill. If she really cares about the lady that she refers, why don't she convince her caucus to vote for the affordability bill so they can do something once for Canadians?